its own right and stems from the turn of the last century. Originally, cars were very much horseless carriages with chassis, engine and body ordered separately. The 1902 curved dash automobile, however, is credited as being the first mass-produced automobile. First began building prototype automobiles back in the late 1897. Over the last few years, a dozen different prototypes were then developed, including one called the Model R. Then a fire destroyed the entire plant, and the Model R was the only one that survived. It became the curved dash model. 1.6 litre water-cooled engine, 4.5 horsepower and a top speed of 20 miles an hour. In 1901, the first year of its production, the car sold 425 units. But the simplicity of its design meant that it was relatively low cost, and annual sales soared to 2,500 in 1902, just under 4,000 then in its third year. And right behind it, following closely, another car from the dawn of motoring. This is the 1902 Rocher 4.5 horsepower. This particular car valued at just over £70,000. It's an early Paris-built vis-a-vis style car, and this one has contested the London to Brighton rally. The vis-a-vis coach were designed by Bergeron-Assis, the coach builders of Bordeaux, and this one is equipped, as you'll see, with a practical hood, handy for those occasional wet weather drives. This hood having been fairly recently recovered completely. Motoring saw things change exponentially, and when a flamboyant salesman called Rolls met an engineer called Royce, they created our next Grand Avenue entrant, the best car in the world. This is the 1912 Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost Cabriolet, originally named the 4050 HP. The name was given to one chassis number 60551 Silver Ghost. It was taken up by the press, and eventually, as late as 1925, Rolls-Royce officially started calling their cars the Silver Ghost. Of course, by Charles Rolls and his engineer Henry Royce way back in 1904. This car produced at first at the Manchester Works before moving production to Derby in 1908. Eventually, after World War II, production moving to Crewe. Weren't quite Bentleys. This is a 1914 DFP. The French-built Doriot Flandron et Paron cars, which W.O. Bentley got involved with. He got the licence for them and had the DFP 1240 HP speed model built exclusively to his own specification. The 1240 went on to capture no fewer than 12 of the Class B speed records at Brooklands in 1913 and 1914. The 1240 really the stepping stone from W.O. Bentley's involvement as a motor dealer to an outright manufacturer when he got the launch of the 3-litre Bentley underway in 1919. Rolls-Royce and Bentley's story would become inextricably linked in later years. But for the 20s, it was all about winning races to sell cars, and there were two very different approaches matches that of Bentley's designs and those of Toro Bugatti. Behind the 1924 Bugatti Type 35B, we've got the 1928 Bentley 4.5. This car, this particular example, was restored in 2007 by William Metcalf and was awarded Best Car at the Bentley Drivers Club National Concourse in the same year.
Women drivers.
Type 35B is on approach once again. The Type 35 was the most successful of the Bugatti racing models. It took the Grand Prix World Championship in 1926. T35s won the Targa Florio for 5 consecutive years from 1925 to 1929. In this example, winning that great event in 1928. This chassis, believed by many to be the first 2.3-litre Grand Prix Type 35 to have been supercharged by the Bugatti factory. Type 35s won over 1,000 races in their time, and while Bugatti scorned the world's fastest lorries, as he called the big powerful Bentleys, they still dominated Le Mans, winning 5 years out of 7 in the 1920s. And by the 30s, Bentleys were getting even bigger with a super luxury 8-litre model. Was based on the largest rolling chassis made by Bentley, produced from 1930 to 1932. Only 100 examples were ever built. Intended as a super luxury car for wealthy buyers, the 8-litre was introduced a year into the Great Depression and was the last completely new model by Bentley before the company's financial collapse in 1931. This particular example was actually originally a 4-litre, the model bought by Lord Narbonne in September 1931. The big 8-litre saw Bentley Motors placed into receivership and bought by its great rival Rolls-Royce. But the small car market, however, was growing exponentially as small cars became ever more affordable. So we have on parade the 1935 Morris 8 military wireless car, followed by the 1934 Jaguar SS1. The Morris 8 was a small car produced by Morris from 1935 to 1948. Its first really huge success, with more than 164 sold in total. This military wireless car is the only one known out of 5,500 that were made specifically for military specification and for the British Army, with many of them having been lost at Dunkirk. The military Morrises also saw a name change for the manufacturer of our next Grand Avenue Classic. Here we can see the 1934 Jaguar SS1, the cream-coloured car. The SS1 was a British 2-door sports saloon and tourer built by Swallow Coach Building in Coventry. It was a forerunner to the Jaguar mark, first presented to the public at the 1931 London Motor Show and then manufactured between 1932 and 1936, when only 148 cars were built. It had a startling design, excessively long bonnet, tiny passenger compartment and helmet-type front wings, suggesting the ultimate in high performance, although all cars were available actually at a relatively low price. SS1 coming back up once once again. After the war in 1945, SS1 became Jaguar Cars Limited. And while the 40s gave us the newly named Jaguar marque, it also gave us this new British icon. Stemming from the ideas sketched in the sand by a former aircraft engineer and built using leftover wartime aluminium panels, the Land Rover's famed durability stemmed from post-war ingenuity. Land Rover Series 1 that you see here was one of the very early models. Production began in June 1948 and this particular model was built in September 1948. This particular car, since 1988, has been driven extensively as well as being used for toe-starting pre-war racing cars at the Goodwood Revival, and it's still, after all these years, proving to be a very reliable vehicle. From a make-do approach to the art of coach building, which is perfectly displayed in our next two cars, both something of a last hurrah for their makers. So here we have the 1947 Delahaye 135M and the 1952 Alfa Romeo 6C Sports Pininfarina. Delahaye. We'll talk about first the company founded in France, in Tours, in 1906, later moving to Paris. Early production models were rather lacklustre, but then came this magnificent 1935 Type 135. This is 1947 model for later in the production line. The 135 was introduced and immediately had an impact upon the market and on the racetracks, winning the Ulster Trophy and winning at Le Mans in 1938. The 1952 Alfa Romeo 6C 2500 Sport Pininfarina, you can see coachwork by the well-established Pininfarina company. The 6C 2500 chassis was the last pre-war Alfa design that was built post-war to revive the production of cars by Alfa Romeo. The car representing the last very true coach-built Alfa Romeo before the semi-production line kicked in the following year. Also saw motoring move into a truly golden age. And here we now see, from the 50s, the Mercedes 300 SL Gullwing. Followed by the 1957 Jaguar C-Type, which was once owned by 5 times Formula 1 world champion Juan Manuel Fangio. Was the first carnation of the SL Class Grand Tourer convertibles and was the fastest production car of its day. Best known, of course, for the distinctive gull-wing doors, though they're only introduced from 1955, and the first ever consumer fuel injection and, as I said, the world's fastest top speed. Originally, the gull-wing was introduced as a racing car in 1952, the 300 SL, winning Le Mans that year and finishing second at the Mille Miglia. The top speed, the car produced something like 145 to 160 miles an hour and changed the perception of Mercedes from solid cars to desirable sporty models. And then the Jaguar C-Type. C stood for competition, and the C-Type was an outstanding success straight away. At Le Mans in 1951, Sterling Moss drove one. He set the fastest lap, though he retired early, but Peter Walker and Peter Whitehead had a dominant victory at Le Mans in their C-Type that year, breaking the old distance record with an hour to spare and finishing 75 miles on track. The second place, Talbot Largo. This car, owned by Juan Manuel Fangio, and this Jaguar C-Type is also the official 2012 and 2013 Jaguar Heritage Works race car, which went at Monaco in 2012 and 2014 and successfully completed the Mini Miglia in 2012, 2013 and last year. Also, it won the Freddie March Memorial Trophy at Goodwood in 2012, making it the first ever Jaguar to win a Goodwood endurance race. It secured its second win then the following year in 2013. Celebration as 1955 brought the birth of a revolutionary icon, 60 years old this year. Was first launched, as I say, 60 years ago in 1955 at the Paris Motor Show, where, incredibly, it took 12,000 orders on day one. This particular model is the 1961 Citroën DS, and it went on the car to become hugely successful with more than 1.4 million examples sold worldwide over the next 2 decades. Joined by a couple of our DS friends as they go on parade here on their 60th anniversary. The DS, most famously, featured in the pioneering hydro-pneumatic self-levelling suspension, which kept a constant ride height of the car above the road, regardless of the load. The point of all this was to combat the negative effects that changes in load could have on road handling, on aerodynamic possibilities, and also the performance of the car in a collision. It was so good that Rolls-Royce even licensed it for use on the rear axle of their Silver Shadow. The DS brand is alive and still thriving today. Representing the modern lineup here is a very special version of the DS5. In fact, it's the special car of the current French President Hollande. This is an inauguration vehicle from 2012, a one-off open-roof DS. The main difference is that 2.5 years ago it was raining rather heavily and he got absolutely drenched. Not so today. The DS range was relaunched in 2010, and in 2014 DS became a standalone brand in its own right. In the 1960s, though, the Italians were creating cars that can easily be described as works of art. Here we see a 1961 example of the Ferrari GT250 California Spider. The 250 was produced from 1953 to 1964, with the Spider California released in 1960. In 2008, this car fetched nearly £5.6 million, or $11 million US at auction, making it at the time the most valuable vintage car ever sold under the hammer. Followed on the Grand Prix by the rather distinctively coloured 1969 Lamborghini Miura S. The Miura was produced between 1966 and 1973 as a model, and at the time of its launch the Miura was the fastest production road car available. In the end, only 764 were ever built. recently seen a similar looking car, a replica of the 250 GT California Spider in the 1986 film Ferris Bueller's Day Off. The 250 Testarossa model also had huge success for Ferrari on the track, with 3 wins at Le Mans for 250 Testarossas in 58, 60 and 61, and 4 wins at Sebring. This particular car was once owned by Hollywood movie star James Coulthard, who bought the car from Belgium when he was filming The Great Escape. And here once again a chance to see this 1969 Lamborghini Miura. This particular car was supplied to Justin de Villeneuve, who was the manager and the boyfriend of the famous supermodel Twiggy. When it was new back in 1969, a friend remembering them cruising down the King's Road in the Miura back in its day, very much part of the swinging 60s scene. But not to be outdone, the British outputs of the 1960s are equally a sight to behold. The 1966 Jaguar Series 1 E-Type 4.2 litre, and the 1962 Ford Saxon Cortina, the 1964 AC Cobra, and the 1965 Aston DB6. So to the E-Type, the original E-Type manufactured from 1961 to 1975, and on its release, Enzo Ferrari, of all people, called it the most beautiful car ever made. This 1966 Series 1 has been restored by Eagle to their legendary Better Than You standard. That was in 2005, and it's become Eagle E-Type number 18. Series 1 version of the E-Type was produced between 61 and 68, and at the time you could have a 3.8 or a 4.2 litre engine with it. 2011, 767 E-Type Jaguars took to the circuit at Silverstone, at the Silverstone Classic, establishing a new Guinness World Record to celebrate the model's 50th birthday. The next car is the 1962 Ford Saxon Cortina, a truly unique car. This car was built originally by Ford as a concept to compete in the coupe market, but it never made it into production. The single concept was flown to the USA for evaluation and was never seen again. The Grand Avenue now features a replica of this car, a car which was never put into production, but which has been lovingly replicated from a single solitary photo, the only one in existence, of the original car. And then we have the 1964 AC Cobra, a joint venture between the British AC manufacturer based in Thames Ditton and of course Los Angeles, and the great Carroll Shelby, ex-Formula 1 racer and Le Mans winner, who put his engines inside the Cobra. This is a 1964 version. And at the back we have the 1965 Aston DB6. This one, the British racing green car, is an example formerly owned by Beatles frontman, legendary pop star Sir Paul McCartney. And in the car, he's said to have recorded the lyrics on the dashboard tape, a real recorder, to the great hit Hey Jude. The 70s were a decade of big hair, big shoes, big ideas, and these big hitting cars. First up, we have the Range Rover, launched in 1970 by the Rover Company, of course creators of the Land Rover marque. The idea of producing a larger brother to the Land Rover was first developed as far back as 1958, but the Road Rover project, as it was then called, was shelved and lay dormant until 1966. In 67, a prototype was built, and the design finally realised in 1969. And it's followed by our second car in this section, the 1975 Vauxhall 2.3 Slant 4 Forenza, otherwise known as the Droom Snoot, thanks to its Concorde-esque aero appendage at the front. This car developed and designed by Vauxhall's guru, Wayne Cherry. Next in line is our 1976 1975 Jensen Interceptor convertible. Jensen introduced the Interceptor back in 1966 at the London Earls Court Motor Show. Interceptors were hand-built at their West Bromwich factory between 1966 and 1976. And at the back of the queue we have the Maserati Kamsin, a GT car produced by Maserati from 1974 to 1982. Here though once again comes the Range Rover, and this particular example is the 1970 Range Rover pre-production prototype. The actual car which won the first off-road endurance chase race in the United Kingdom, and one of only 25 cars that were hand-built before production and used by Rover engineers and directors for both testing and evaluation. Through the top loop then we have the droop snoot, that Concorde-esque, that famous nose, that appendage, but it wasn't just a styling feature, it boasted an incredibly low drag coefficient for a time when most cars were pretty brick-like. The slick lines improved fuel economy greatly, reducing the power needed to attain its top speed by some 30 horsepower. And this was the first Vauxhall, the droop snoot, to crack 0 to 60 in less than 10 seconds. The Jensen Interceptor coming through now. The timing of the launch was not the best for the car in the middle of the OPEC oil crisis. By the time Jensen went into receivership in 1976, just 467 had been produced. And finally, we bid farewell to the Maserati Kamsin, 4.9 litre 16-valve V8, delivering 320 brake horsepower and designed by the famous Marcello Gandini, one of Bertoni's first works for Maserati. The styling of our next car was by the hand of the same near legendary designer of the Maserati and the Miura. It is definitely legendary, it's the Stratos. This is a 1976 Lancia Stratos Group 4, the infamous car developed as a homologation special for the Group 4 regulation rallying, which was the golden era of rallying. The Stratos were produced between 1972 and 1974. Just 492 road-going versions were made in all, and it was powered by a Dino 2.5 litre V6 engine. Went on to win the 1974, 75 and 76 World Rally Championship titles. In particular example had success in the Italian and European rallying, and the decade also saw a group of cars that share their origins with the rally homologation design Stratos. This group of cars all owe their speed to the infamous, the immense Group B rally. So in our Group B section, led away by the Audi Quattro Sports short wheelbase, we have a Ferrari 308 GTB and a 1987 Porsche 959. So the Audi Quattro Sports SWB, the first sports car with permanent all-wheel drive. The Rally Quattros rewrote the book. They were the first rally car to take advantage of the then recently changed rules which allowed the use of four-wheel drive in competition racing. And in 1981, Michelle Mouton became the first female driver to win a World Championship rally at the wheel of a 300 brake horsepower Audi Quattro. second run down, the Audi Quattro leading them through. The Quattro A1 debuted in the 1983 World Rally Championship season and went on to win the Swedish Rally and the Rally Portugal in the hands of Harry Mikalo. Driven by Stig Blomqvist, Mikola and Walter Roll, the 82 Evolution won a total of 8 World Rallies, 3 in 1983, where Mikola went on to take the title, and 5 in 1984, where Blomqvist went on to take the title. Audi winning the manufacturer's title in both 83 and 84. The Ferrari, just behind the 308 GTB, well, Ferrari's production 308 had never really been conceptualised with motorsport in mind, but a handful were built for Group B competition, and they were very successfully run in major rallies, including a second place finish at the Targa Florio. And then we have our 1987 Porsche 959, which along with the Ferrari F40 was responsible for the 1980s being one of the most memorable decades for supercars, with nearly 450 brake horsepower from its 2.8 flat-six twin-turbo engine. The 959 could do 0 to 60 in just 3.7 seconds and reach a speed of 197 miles an hour, making it the world's fastest street-legal production car at the time. The Grand Parade is the Mercedes 560 SL.